You would have been walking around completely naked, not for a day, not for a year, for hundreds of thousands of years. And here's the part that should surprise you. Scientists can actually pinpoint fairly precisely when that changed, not from a piece of ancient fabric, not from a painting, from lice. Let's back up. Early humans evolved in Africa, in a warm climate, and by that point, our bodies had already lost most of their fur. That's a separate evolutionary story, tied to sweating and staying cool. Without thick fur and in a hot climate, there wasn't much pressure to cover up. For a very long stretch of prehistory, humans simply didn't need clothes to survive. So what changed? Around 70,000 to 55,000 years ago, groups of humans began migrating out of Africa, into Europe and Asia. And those regions were nothing like home. Colder temperatures, shorter daylight hours, snow, biting wind that pulls heat straight out of an exposed body. A hairless primate adapted for the African savanna was suddenly facing an ice age. That should be the whole story, right? Humans got cold, so humans invented clothes. Except that's not actually what the evidence shows, and this is where it gets genuinely strange. Remember those lice? Humans carry two separate species of louse. Head lice, which live in your hair, and body lice don't live on skin at all. They live in clothing, only visiting the body to feed. Genetically, body lice are basically head lice that evolved to survive in a brand new habitat. Fabric and hide, worn against skin. By comparing the DNA of head lice and body lice, and calculating how long it takes a population to split into a distinct new lineage, researchers estimated when that new habitat, clothing, first became available. Their answer, roughly 170,000 years ago. Here's the twist. That's about 70,000 to 100,000 years before humans migrated into those cold northern regions. Wait. Really? Humans were wearing clothes tens of thousands of years before they actually needed them for warmth? That's what the genetic evidence suggests, which means the first clothing almost certainly wasn't invented to survive an ice age. It was already a normal part of human life back in warm, sunny Africa. So why would anyone in a hot climate bother covering up? A few practical reasons, and none of them require snow. Simple wraps or hides could protect skin from sunburn. They could guard against biting insects, some of which carried deadly diseases. They could protect against scrapes, thorns, and rough terrain during long treks or hunts. None of that required tailoring or stitching, just a hide draped over the shoulders or wrapped around the waist. Then, when humans finally did move into colder climates, that existing habit of covering the body turned out to be exactly the head start they needed. The behavior came first. The survival advantage came later, and once it mattered enormously. Now, wearing an animal hide is one thing. Making that hide comfortable, insulating, and durable is a completely different engineering problem. And this is where the archaeology actually starts backing up the lice. Across sites associated with Neanderthals, archaeologists keep finding one particular stone tool over and over, a scraper used to clean fat and tissue off the underside of animal hides. Processing a single hide this way could take hours of repetitive, exhausting work. Researchers have even linked a distinctive pattern of arm bone wear in Neanderthal skeletons to this exact motion. Not spear throwing as once assumed, but scraping. So Neanderthals were clearly working hides. But here's a genuinely surprising gap. At Neanderthal sites, archaeologists have never found an eyed needle, a needle with a hole for thread. Homo sapiens sites have them. Neanderthal sites don't. That doesn't necessarily mean Neanderthals had no clothing at all. Some researchers argue they simply used other tools we haven't identified yet. But it does suggest a real difference. Homo sapiens may have been sewing snugly fitted, tailored garments, while Neanderthals were more likely wrapping and draping loose hides. And in brutally cold environments, that difference, a sealed, insulated garment versus a draped one, could matter for survival. The oldest known needle with an eye for thread comes from Denisova Cave in Siberia, and it's about 50,000 years old. It was carved from bird bone, and, remarkably, it still looks usable today. It wasn't even made by our species. It was made by Denisovans, a separate group of ancient humans. That single needle tells us something important. By 50,000 years ago, someone in Ice Age Siberia had already figured out how to punch a hole through bone, thread it, and stitch pieces of material together. That's not a caveman wrapping himself in a blanket. That's a tailor. From there, clothing kept evolving, but not just for survival. Once humans had the technology to make garments, decorate hides, dye fibers, and add beads or ornaments, clothing started doing something new. It started saying things about the person wearing it. Across countless ancient cultures, what you wore began signaling who you were. Your role, your status, your group, sometimes your achievements. A chief's garment looked different from a hunter's. Clothing stopped being purely functional and became a form of communication, thousands of years before anyone thought of it as fashion. So here's where that leaves us. Humans probably started covering their bodies around 170,000 years ago, likely for sun and insect protection, long before it was a matter of survival. Tens of thousands of years later, when humans pushed into freezing new territory, that habit became essential and evolved into genuinely sophisticated, tailored technology, stitched together with bone needles in the middle of an ice age. We didn't invent clothing because we were cold. We were